Homing bracket!
Lamb is a 2021 horror drama that is produced by A24. A24 is a studio that I am a pretty big fan of. I own a lot of their films. Now, I do know for mainstream audiences, A24 is very hit or miss, especially you can tell at the box office, especially if you look on Rotten Tomatoes with the audience ratings. And I have to say right off the bat, Lamb is a movie that I saw with a pretty big audience. I was actually quite surprised. My one friend, myself, literally before the movie started, we literally turned to each other and were like, I don't know how this is going to go. And sure enough, the audience was not a fan of this movie. 2 minutes in, there were people saying, like, this is a horror movie, question mark. And then by the end, people were making that not a question and saying, that wasn't a horror movie. So, saw it with a very closed-minded audience, unfortunately. Like, if you don't understand the concept of horror being very subjective and that what one person might find to be scary, another person might not, then unfortunately I would say you might not like Lamb because you might like jump scare horror or whatever the case may be, which is fine. But for myself, I wasn't scared by this movie, but I will say that I really did enjoy this movie quite a bit. I liked the building of the tension. There's this eeriness to the movie that I just couldn't quite shake off. There's like little things here and there that seem a bit off, but like at first it's not enough to where it kind of is noticeable. It's only in marination process where you kind of think about it more and more, where you're like, okay, early on, this seemed a bit off, this seemed a bit off, but it's really interesting to see these characters' lives and how mundane it is and how it's very repetitive and everything. So that way, about halfway into the movie, when a certain character is introduced and kind of throws things into chaos, it makes it to be very intriguing and it gives this sense of even more tension because, again, you're watching these characters go about their everyday life and how it's very repetitive. And then there's a character that is quite the opposite, honestly. You're not really quite sure about this character. You're really not. And I really liked that aspect, honestly, because, again, it kept me on guard. And at the same time, it also built that atmosphere even more, which, again, A24 movies are very atmospheric. And this movie is definitely among them. It's not the most atmospheric, obviously, but it is definitely a movie that I can definitely praise for its atmosphere, as well as its tone. This movie does have some moments of humor, but for the most part, it is pretty serious. And I think it's fitting because, again, this is a movie that is more visual storytelling based. And through the visuals, you can definitely tell that this is a movie that's kind of relishing in certain themes and messages that, are more serious, especially with that ending that, by the way, I really dug the ending. I thought the ending was very surprising. I wasn't really expecting it to end that way. My theater wasn't the biggest fan of the ending, so keep that in mind. If you're not really someone that likes ambiguous endings, you might not like this ending. But for myself, I thought it kind of fit everything that we had seen prior. So, but that's just me personally. I also liked the cinematography. I thought that was rock solid. I thought it was very naturalistic in the approach. But then there are other times where it does have this like fantasy look. And I thought that that was really intriguing, honestly, because again, it does give this otherworldly feel almost. Because again, this is a movie that has, 3 characters? Technically 4 characters, but they're in the middle of nowhere. And I definitely think that the movie did a good job at garnering that feeling of, holy cow, these people are in the middle of nowhere. So I liked that. I really dug that aspect. But one thing I will say about this movie is that I overall think that this movie is just okay. But there is a lot to talk about. And it is also one of those movies that I do kind of wonder if maybe if I were to revisit this down the line, like if I give this movie a couple of years and I revisit it, maybe I'll like it more. But as it stands right now, similar to other A24 movies, I found the pacing to be quite an issue for myself. I found it to be too slow. And that was something I was not really expecting. Like I knew it was going to be a slow burn, but holy cow, it was very slow. And again, I respected it to an extent. Like I said earlier in my review, I respected the fact that it built up the first and second act to be very slow to represent the mundane life of the characters. But unfortunately, because of that, it does make it so that way you're kind of not necessarily on edge and everything, but you do kind of have to sit back and say to yourself, it's frustrating. That's the bottom line for myself, at least. It's not badly paced. It's not. It's just a little bit too slow. And I think that that kind of hampers the whole rewatchability factor to this movie, at least for myself. But again, these are minor quibbles in the long run of things. I also think that the themes and messages, as I mentioned earlier, I liked in the concept of the themes and messages, especially that ending. But I do think that they should have built it up a little bit more with those themes and messages. But overall, I do have to praise this movie because, again, it is a movie that is more about the visual storytelling than the dialogue. In fact, there's not really that much dialogue to this movie, especially in the first half. So I have to give this movie props in that regards because it's definitely unique in those regards. But again, in terms of entertainment value, I wasn't really entertained by this movie, and I do think that the rewatchability value might be hampered. But again, if I watch it a second time down the line, I'll obviously give you guys an updated review on Letterboxd. But for now, I think that those two things, rewatchability and entertainment value, were a bit hampered. But again, I really do respect the filmmaking for this movie, which is why I'm going to be giving Lamb a 3 out of 5 at star rating, which again gets the good old Frank's hot sauce. So again, this is a movie that I respected more than I enjoyed, if that makes sense. If you are someone that is a pretty big film buff and you can appreciate art house and independent filmmaking, I say definitely give this movie a shot. If you are expecting a full-blown horror movie with lots of blood, guts, and everything, you're going to be disappointed. But again, this is a horror movie. Just might not be the one for you. But guys, Lamb, what did you think about it? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And as always, subscription, notification bell, and all that. Catch you guys later.